Well, hello there, and welcome to another tank review. I'm Corny Swiss, and today we'll be looking at the Tiger P, a rank 4 6.0 battle rating German premium tank. Now, as with all reviews, the various parts of this review are going to be timestamped down below in the description, so if there's something in particular you want to see about this tank, go ahead and look in the description, find what you want to watch, click that timestamp, and it'll take you on your merry way. But if you want to hear the garage portion of this review, let's get started. So like I said, this is the, I can't even bother trying, I'm not even going to bother trying saying that, but it's the Tiger P. It's a Tiger 1P. The main differences between this Tiger and the Tiger 1 we see in War Thunder is, as you can tell, the chassis. Now this was an idea from Porsche where they designed this big, heavily armored chassis with twin engines to make a new heavy tank. Now this chassis would eventually become the basis for the Ferdinand and the Elephant heavy tank destroyers, and you can very clearly see the resemblance here, and it is basically the same. But the idea with this tank was to obviously make a new heavy tank, but there was only one of these produced, and it was used as a command tank, which is actually what we have here in War Thunder. We have the command variant of this tank, and it was actually just the only one put into service. So kind of a cool idea that this is modeled on the only tank put into service. It's probably not, perfectly accurate, like maybe these weren't there, but the idea is here. Now, I said this is the Tiger P, and you can clearly see the resemblances between the Tiger 1 and this tank. You have the Tiger 1's turret, basically, with some extra stuff slapped on, and the Tiger 1's gun, the 88. In this game, we have the 88 KWK-36. Pretty good gun. And like I said, it's a 6.0 battle rating. The big key difference between this tank and the other Tiger is the armor, which we're going to look at in more detail. But first, let's talk about some of the maneuverability related statistics. The tank is 65 tons. It's very heavy, The King Tiger 105, if I'm not mistaken, is 70 tons. This tank is damn near close to that. 600 horsepower engine at 3,000 RPM. The engine's underpowered for how much weight it needs to move. This tank is not fast and it does not turn well. The power to weight ratio is pretty bad. Max speed of 40 kilometers an hour. I've done that downhill, like going down a mountain, down on the hill or the cliff on Ash River. Most of the time if you get this thing running, you'll get to about 30, and then it'll be very difficult to build speed after that. You'll do it very slowly. So this tank does not move quickly. 29 degrees maximum inclination, so you can go up a 29-degree slope. I mean, it's lower than other tanks, but I don't put a whole lot of stock into that statistic. Turret rotation speed, 7.5 degrees a second. The turret turns really, really slow. But that's what you'd expect from a Tiger turret. It's got a lot of armor bolted. It's just big, and it has this armor on it, so it's going to move slow. 8 degrees of gun depression, 16 degrees of elevation. Gun really doesn't move all that much. The 8 degrees of depression is good, and I've actually read somewhere that's not, that may not be exactly right, but as it stands in the game, 8 degrees of gun depression, that's fairly consistent for German tanks. Usually 8 to 10 is what they have. All right, and 16 degrees of elevation is kind of weak, but elevation usually isn't what gets you killed. So we come to the armor. Now on paper it says 102 millimeters of hull armor. Okay, and 100 millimeters of turret armor. Yeah, if this is the Ferdinand's chassis, that's not right. So let's pull up the armor thing here. All right, so first thing you notice is that there's actually different sections of armor. This is 102 millimeters of armor. If you mouse over the machine gun port, there's 102 millimeters of armor behind that. All right, this is where that 200 millimeters comes from. You have a big front plate, and then you have another plate behind it. So combined, these are 204 millimeters of armor. And the same is true on this plate here. There's 102 on top and then 102 below it. So here and here, these those highlighted spots, there are 200 millimeters of armor. Okay, that's pretty cool. Alright, the shoulders of the tank. Just as on the Ferdinand, it's 82 millimeters, because the sides of the tank actually wrap around the front. Alright, and at this angle, facing straight on, it's 140 some odd degrees, and it goes out, but it doesn't exceed 145 or so. We'll talk about the significance of that in just a moment. Lower plate, 82 millimeters. I mean, with this angling, it's about 150 at the best case scenario, 151. And then you have this upper plate, which, I mean, no one's really going to be shooting you there because it's angled at 78 degrees. Even if they hit it, it's probably bounce. Or it'll ricochet off this plate and hit this 200 some odd millimeters. And it'll just deflect, because the round would have lost too much kinetic energy hitting that. So let's talk about the front of the turret. The front of the turret actually has a lot of different armor zones on here. You can kind of see this sort of... That's kind of cool, right? Looks pretty cool. Alright, so the first bit, it says 100 millimeters of turret armor. Alright, so if we mouse over this and highlight sort of the border of the turret, yes, it's 100 millimeters. Flat on. Like, it's not going to be much thicker than that. 100 millimeters right there. Now, as you move in, you have 90 millimeters. Alright, and that's pretty much flat on. So that's 90 millimeters, but that's also compounded with the 100 millimeters behind it. So that's pretty good, right? So that's 190 millimeters right there on this seam. You have 200 millimeters right there, which you'll note is not covered by either of the other sections. So 200 millimeters, this portion of the turret is about 200 millimeters. Alright, as you move to here, this highlighted section is 120 millimeters of armor, but you'll also notice that it doesn't have anything behind it. That is 120 millimeters, and that's how thick the armor is right there. Okay, there's a hole behind it. And then you start getting more towards the gun mantlet. The ring of the gun mantlet is 100 millimeters, but thanks to sloping and stuff, it's actually more like 190. Alright, so that's pretty good, 190 there. You have the base of the gun right here, which is 135, which is flat on, 0 degrees constructed slope angle. So that's 135, and you can see there's nothing really behind that, right? And then you have this ring on the gun itself, so nothing can penetrate and go down the gun barrel, the shaft, or whatever this is. All right, so what do we take from all that? The outside portion of the turret right here, these two spots and these two spots, from here to the edge, from the edge of the turret to the edge of this red right there, is 200 millimeters on both sides. Now the middle, oh, and there's also a 90 millimeter weak spot right there, which is actually, well, I guess it's covered mostly by this 120 millimeter. So I guess that's a little extra bit of armor. And then we have same sort of thing over here, but the point is that the middle part of the turret is 120 millimeters and there's nothing behind it. So that's kind of a glaring weak point. The front of the turret is not that tremendous. Alright? The front of the turret lets this tank down. The front of the armor also kind of lets this tank down, and I'll explain why. Sure, it's 204 millimeters thick, 203 with the sloping and such. Alright, so let's say it's 205 millimeters. There are guns at medium range that this tank can see, which can do serious damage to 200 millimeters of armor. Right, I'm looking at you, IS-2s and not T-54s, but IS-2s. I find that IS-2s, SU-100s, don't have a tremendous amount of difficulty at, well, definitely not at close range, but at medium range can actually damage this tank from the front. Now, you do have the advantage of they need a pretty good hit on here. If you're angled, poking around a corner, let's say, like maybe the wall is right here, and you turn your turret and you're shooting at them like that, it'll be very difficult for them to penetrate this, right? It's angled. Sure, you have this machine gun port weak point, which I've seen people taking advantage of. But generally, the front of this tank is fairly durable. At close ranges, though, IS-2 hits this square on, it will penetrate. And I have been penetrated at kind of medium ranges, let's say 400 or 500 meters, I think. Well, probably a little less, more like 300 meters by an IS-2 through my front plate. SU-100, IS-2, they both go clean through the turret. I've been penetrated. Most of the time when I get knocked out from the front, it's through the turret, and the shell just goes in and blows up and kills everybody. So it's a little unfortunate that way. I have been taken out via the lower plate, so that's something you want to be covering up. And this machine gun port as well. If they're close enough or they get lucky enough to hit this machine gun port, you're basically dead. There's not a whole lot you can do. This 200 millimeters of armor is useful, but my primary issue with it is that it is flat. Right? It's the same issue I have with the Tiger 1. The armor may be relatively thick for its tier, and this is certainly thick for its tier, but it's flat, which is a little bit of an issue. Alright, but let's talk about the sides and the stuff tank before we get into more specifics about layout and things like that. Side of the tank, 82 millimeters. Side of the turret, 82 millimeters. Alright, pretty standard. And at the rear, it's paper, but it's 82 millimeters. 82 millimeters. So it's not really paper. It's the same as the sides. But, I mean, if you, at this rank, if you get hit in the sides of anything or the rear, you're probably getting toasted. I mean, it's just how it works. Putting all the armor on the front is a pretty good idea, because to make the sides durable, you just wouldn't be able to move. So, you know, take that as you will. Let's pull up the layout though, so we can talk more specifically about this armor and the problems it poses. Alright, here's the layout. You'll notice one good thing: there is no ammo in the turret. Alright, that's pretty good. So the turret weak spot right here, sure, it'll toast your gunner, toast your commander, could toast your loader, cannon breech, stuff like that, but most likely ammo may not be hit. Alright, but there's a bigger problem. Notice where these ammo racks are located. In the sides of the tank, even basically on the outside of the thickest armor. That kind of seems like a design flaw to me, because if you'll notice, ammo is behind here. 82 millimeters, effective thickness about 140. Same on this side. From the front, you can, it's difficult, but if they nail you right here, they can and will set off your ammo rack through these shoulders of the tank, especially if you're angled a little bit. This is basically 100 millimeters. Send a shell right through there. Let's look at what's right behind it. Ammo. Ammo, ammo, ammo. A big caliber shell, SU-100, IS-2, even a smaller caliber shell like the T-44 will go right clean through here and gut the tank and just detonate all this juicy ammo behind it and set you on fire while it goes out. You really, really need to be mindful of these shoulders, because although they are sloped back, they're not that thick. You know, they count as side armor basically. Now, that being said, this tank, much like its other companions that it's sort of tiering, prefers to sit back a little bit and not get involved up close, because T-44s and things like that can, and T-34 variants, T-34, 85, can circle this thing all day long. American tanks can circle this thing all day long. And American APCR can penetrate this these shoulders very easily at range. That means this tank is kind of, the front of the armor, yeah, 200 millimeters right there. You have to make it work though. You have to be sneaky. You have to do things like come around a corner like this and present a very difficult target. Alright? Because if you can make this 250 millimeters of armor, right, 125 on the first plate, 125 on the second plate, and the same here, and this is damn near 200 millimeters, this is basically safe. This is behind a wall, because the wall would be right here, and the other shoulder is protected. This is a great position for this tank if you have a building or something right here to protect you. If you don't, this is a horrible position, or if you go maybe a little too far and this is exposed, you're going to get toasted. Alright, so you need to be mindful of that. However, against people who, or against maybe medium to lower tier competition, at tier competition. So like this is at 6.0, so like 5.7 battle rating. You're still mainly seeing 85 millimeter guns from the Russians. For the Americans, you're seeing 76s mainly. This tank can deal with 76 millimeters. This front plate, in my experience from the Jumbo review, one of the first tanks I ran into in one of the replays, I think it was the simulator replay, was a Tiger P like this. And I did kill him, but I killed him by shooting him through his gun mantlet, not through. I actually shot this upper plate section because initially I thought it was a Tiger, and the round bounced. It was the APCR round. It bounced off because this is 200 millimeters. The Jumbo can't penetrate 200 millimeters, right? But the turret it certainly can do. So the turret, in my opinion, the turret is what lets this tank down. The turret is what you need to maybe like right before you receive a hit, maybe angle it, like wiggle it just a little bit, try and throw it off a little bit, make him hit this thicker 200 millimeter sections rather than maybe these 120 millimeter sections. There's little nuances and things like that you can do to help protect this tank. But in terms of angling, unless you have something to cover these shoulders, don't do it. It's a bad idea. Because although, you know, this is 80 millimeters, and that looks like a really... If this was on a straight edge and it didn't have this shoulder bit right here, angling like this would make this tank a god. Because the side of this tank is over 250 millimeters. This is over 250 millimeters on average. The turret is pretty thick. You'd have to be facing the turret at him. But at least you don't have... Excuse me. The majority of your tank is covered. But this shoulder right here just takes away all that. Because like I said, there's just ammo behind it, and ammo, and ammo. Same thing on the other side, ammo, ammo, ammo. And if it goes through, it's going to gut your tank. So, that's the armor and sort of the layout. Let's talk about the gun. Alright, so you get this KWK-36, very similar to the Tiger's gun. It is the Tiger's gun, let's be real. I mean, let's just pull this up. KWK-36. It is the same. It's the exact same gun as a Tiger. All right, that's pretty cool. You get some good ammunition choices though. You get the PZGR-39, an AP shell, 130 millimeters penetration at 10 meters, 115 at 500, 91 at 1500, 70 at 2000. All right, and 773 meters per second muzzle velocity. That's pretty good. That's not bad. You also get a heat shell. 103 millimeters penetration at all ranges, 600 meters per second muzzle velocity. That's okay. I think 103 is a little wimpy at for the tanks this thing's gonna see, but 103 is not bad. Actually, it's not good. It's below average. Don't know if you should use this. The APCR. 187 millimeters penetration at 10 meters, 155 at 500. 120 at 1500 and 107 at 2000. This is a majority of the time what I find myself firing. Not because I want to, but because I need to. Because you look at this, outside of maybe 200 meters, it's going to be difficult to penetrate the front of, let's say, an IS-2 or an IS-1 or most Russian tanks, for that matter, that have decent turret armor. The APCR can penetrate that out to about 1500 meters. Okay, that's pretty good. I don't like firing APCR because I don't like the damaging effect, but I have noticed that this APCR tends to fragment quite a bit. So it almost does the same job as this. And the issue I have with this round is that the penetration is too low for the competition this tank sees. Because you're at a 6.0 battle rating, you're more likely to see than the Tiger at 5.7. The 6.0 battle rating Tiger P is more likely to see IS-2s, T-44s, things like that have decent turret armor. So you kind of need a good stock of this APCR. I usually run a 50-50 split, but I find myself firing more APCR than AP. There's been situations where this AP won't penetrate the front of a T-34-85's turret, so I have to switch to APCR, and then I start penetrating. And it helps that this thing is that the APCR has 1,000 meter per second muzzle velocity, so it's fairly easy to get those rounds on target. The gun is pretty accurate. So I find myself firing a lot of APCR, not because I want to, just because I feel like you almost have to sometimes, especially to deal with IS-2s, because you need to stay back from them and not get close with them because they're more maneuverable than you, which is not good. And most of the time, the way you get knocked down this tank is you got flanked, or there's enemies approaching you from multiple sides and things like that. So you need to stay back a little bit. But rate of fire, 10 seconds to reload the gun with a decent crew. That's pretty good. 80 rounds of ammunition. You get a 30 cal machine gun, 4,000 rounds of ammunition. Something I've started doing with the machine gun is shooting the ground in front of my opponent and trying to, I guess, block their vision and kicking up dirt and grass and knocking over trees and things like that. So it's more difficult for them to accurately hit my weak spots. I think that's a pretty good strategy to do. I also try and maybe shoot at their gun a little bit, maybe damage it a little so it makes them paranoid about firing, but most of the time I just try and cover their vision, and I found that actually works decently, especially in simulator battle. So something to consider, some use for this 30 cal. Because realistically, 30 cal is not very good for like dealing with tanks. So, synopsis of the last however many minutes it's been. The armor, yes, you have 200 millimeters of frontal armor on these front plates. You have 82 on the shoulders, which is the real weakness of this tank. The turret is not great. Parts of it are 200 millimeters, parts of it are 120, both of which are pennable at some range by tanks or enemy tanks that this tank will see, like IS-2s, for example, or SU-100s. I've had an SU-100 at in excess of 500 meters pen the just go clean through the front of my tank and one-shot me because the shell fragmented inside killed the crew. So it has armor, but it's armor that you have to put in a situation to succeed. And succeeding in this tank, I'm not going to say it's more difficult than I find with some other tanks. But we'll let the replays do the talking. So let's move on to the replay, shall we? Alright, so here we are in a realistic battle on the new White Rock Castle, whatever this map's name, I don't know. I think it's White Rock Fortress or something like that. Realistic battle. I've found that my usual, I guess, strategy on this map is to push forward into the field, try and flank the enemy as they move towards the fortress, and then follow them in, kind of. I don't like going immediately to the fortress, especially not in a heavy tank, because I feel like it's just too confined. There's too many alleys, avenues. The terrain is too rough. I mean, the terrain on this map in general is really rough for heavy tanks. There's lots of little ridges and stuff that are just difficult to traverse. But we're going to be having a go here. Like I said in the garage portion, this tank isn't quick. It's certainly not fast, but if you can get it going, you know, it's not horrible. Now, when you have to turn and do things and like deal with corners and things like that, it becomes pretty tough. But in an open field like this, moving across relatively gentle ground for this map, it's fine. So first target's up. There's all kinds of stuff. We're going to be facing quite a few American tanks in this game, and it seems that American tanks have sort of taken the game by storm, in the sense that they're generally not weak tanks. Oof, almost got that IS-2. At this range, I need APCR for that front of that IS-2. It's not likely the AP round will penetrate. We're going to get reloaded, fire again. There we go, nice hit. Got his loader. Well, I don't know if I did that. Someone else might have. But we're on target now. Readjust a little bit and go for more of a ammo rack sort of shot. And we knock out his other crew member, killing him. And you'll notice that spread. The APCR round basically exploded and just pelted the entire crew with shrapnel. So that's something I've noticed with the APCR on this tank, is that it generally fragments pretty well. which makes me feel less bad about using it, because I'm not losing very much. T-32 in between the what's that called? God, I know what that's called. Crenellations. There you go. In between the crenellations of the fortress. But he's a problem, but we're gonna have enemy tanks to our side as well. IS-2 right there. Looks like a medium as well, or a tank destroyer or something. Oof. Gonna have to loop some shots in here. Oh, there he is. Is that a Pershing? No, it's a ZSU-37. He got wrecked. So what's happened is that the enemy have capped. Now, that's usually bad for this tank, because if you don't go immediately to the cap circle in this tank, it's very hard to get there. Especially on this map where the terrain is so rough around the city. And it's generally just a maze to get there. Like, I gotta climb this hill here, and then I gotta drop down, and I gotta climb another hill. Just a lot of work for this tank. And this tank isn't fast. You know, it's slow as heavy tanks go, in my opinion. But we're gonna do our best. We're gonna do our best to get over there, reset this cap. For my perspective of this game, not a lot has happened where I was in the world. We nailed an IS-2, we nailed a ZU something 37, that thing. But in terms of enemies, we haven't run into really stiff competition yet. The IS-2 was previously engaged. But we're going to come around here and going to meet our first real opponent. Now, remember that T-32 I was talking about? He's still around here. And lo and behold, there he is. Now, the big thing to remember here is that I'm angled at him, which is bad. He could gut me with a shot to my shoulder. But he doesn't go for it. Now, at this point, I'm angling a little bit and trying to keep the shells going. The T-32 is very effective turret armor. But I'm going to be able to sneak a shot right through the cheeks, which is going to be a little bit of an issue for him. And I've not previously knocked out his gun, so that's good. And someone else goes and nails him. Very healthy assist there. But T-32 has a pretty dangerous gun. I think the penetration on the AP round tops at about 217, which is not great. But that's good enough at probably that range. But he wasn't able to penetrate. I felt like more like I got lucky there. But I think because people aren't 100% sure how to deal with this tank, they go for the weak spots they know, which is generally flat armor or maybe turret pieces, you know, things like that. But you know, that just he just got unlucky, and he didn't aim at the right spot. That's pretty bad, but you know, whatever. This is a new tank, and here we go. Let me see, a Walker Bulldog, if I'm not, or a Pershing, sorry, right through the side of the turret. That'll cook them every time. But we do need to get in that cap circle, and it's been a marathon trying to get here. The key thing about this tank is I would recommend that when you're playing it, go to where the fight is most likely going to be. I think I made a mistake in trying to go to the field. Ultimately, we're going to get here, but it would have been better just to come straight here and contest the cap, especially in a big, slow machine. But that does put me at a disadvantage because it puts me in a situation where my long hull is exposed against medium tanks and such things. Take a hit in the side. I believe that was from AI, so not too terribly concerned. Here's an AI as well. Don't really care about him. He's not in the cap circle. If he was in the cap circle, that'd be a different story. We'd need to actually deal with him. But we need to get up here into the cap circle. Go, go, go. Get in there. Do it. We did it. Oh, there's an enemy medium tank over here. I think it's a Bulldog. Where'd you go? Oh, there he is. Turn the armor. I couldn't see if he got a shot off there. I think he did. But, like I said, the APCR actually does fragment. And I guess this replay is more about the gun than the... Well, I guess you can also look at what happens with this IS-2. I'm going to have problems killing these AI. I don't know, maybe AI are just tougher than players for some reason. I'm switching to AP here, thinking, okay, at this range I should be able to penetrate the front of an IS-2's turret. Right, it's 120 millimeters. I'll aim it right there. Seems we missed. That wasn't good. Already on my position, I'm going to need to back up to the edge of the cap circle. I don't want to get out of the cap circle. And I certainly want to cap. But if I move to the edge, then most likely the arty will miss. And obviously AI don't really hurt you. But yeah, the gun, I'm not convinced about the AP shell. It just doesn't seem to work that well to me. Nice big cap move. Delivered the good news to the cap circle. And now it's all about defending and not dying. But I guess the key thing about this replay that I want this replay to show is that the APCR round is probably what you want to be using. You do need to aim for some weaker, like the key parts. So like ammo racks, gunners, crew member locations, things like that. But look at that spread. Like, you know, I don't know if you can do much better with an AP shell, honestly. Especially when that AP shell's penetration is suspicious at best. So, I mean, something to think about if you decide to pick up this tank. And it is an expensive one. If you decide to pick it up, it's important to, in my mind, use the APCR and go for it like that. But the game is not certainly over yet. We have capped, but the enemy do have an opportunity because they had so many tickets to mount a comeback. Probably should have just YOLO'd the shot, but he's moving and I couldn't see him, so I didn't really want to take the shot. And this is relatively early on when I was playing this tank, and you can tell how I'm still angling. I really shouldn't be, because I am giving them the shoulder of my tank as a weak spot. And that's something you really shouldn't do. Because at least at that range, with an unangled front, he may not penetrate the shoulders of my tank. But if I angle at him, he most certainly will. But you will find when you're driving this tank, you're going to be matched up a lot with Tiger 2s. Which means the competition you'll see a lot of times is IS-2s and things like that, SU-100s. T-32s, Pershings, usually you'll get a couple Pattons. It's not the best. There's a poor M16. I don't think he was probably trying to make a very sneaky cap run. But we are going to grind out the ticket counter and go on to win this game. And I'm not going to make you watch the last part. I get stuck on something and it's rather annoying. So let's cut to the after battle screen, shall we? So it was a fun game. It was an interesting game. And we had to take the Tiger P all over creation to eventually win. But there is something nice about the Tiger P in that you get pretty healthy rewards. And yeah, it was a decent game. So let's move on to the simulator battle, where we'll more demonstrate the armor. So here we are on a simulator battle on a jungle, and it's a conquest mode, but I really have no intention of heading all the way over there to the cap circle. I've spawned in the southern part. It was random spawn. It's just I'm going to take a long time to get there. I feel like I might be better served coming down here, because this map isn't as big as the other maps, and taking this corner and then sitting on the hill or finding a vantage point to harass enemies and knock them out from range. Because this tank is just too slow, too unwieldy to fight in the cap circle. Take a very healthy hit from an IS-2 directly in the face, but didn't penetrate. Because the IS-2 can deal with this tank, but it does need to actually hit fairly solidly. I said in the garage portion that I can deal with this tank at medium ranges, and that is true. But it needs to hit it pretty square and have a very solid transfer of energy to the armor to penetrate. Now I'm not going to shoot that AI because I know that IS-2 is right there, and I'm going to need to deal with him. Now my first shell loaded, I do believe, is AP, which is not ideal. It's unlikely to penetrate, but I don't want to fire and then have to reload because they'll just come around the corner and blast me. We do have teammates who are behind me and on the other side, so that's good. I fire the shell because I saw that he fired, and target undamaged. Kind of expected. It was a tough shot. But now I have APCR loaded, and there are a few enemy tanks around this corner. There's a T-34-85. First shell penetrates. We don't get a good spread and injures some of his crew, but doesn't take him out. T-34-85 shot looks like it hit my front plate. No problem. T-34-85 needs to hit a weak spot. And the weak spot is primarily those shoulders, but even the shoulders are fairly tough. Next shot gets eaten by the cannon breach, but that's not a bad thing. We've damaged his cannon breach. It might explode. Next shot fired. Try and send it right through his front plate, but it just takes it because strong Russian armor. Very strong, yes. Can be annoying that T-34-85 seem to be made of pure Stalinwood nowadays. Not a good shot on the IS-2, but we've taken a few hits. Now we have a friendly Tiger 2P who is also here, and we're going to move together like good old Porsche brothers. He's turning his gun to face the T-34-85 that we know went up at the hill, and here's another T-34-85, and my shot hit his optics. Did no actual damage. Ooh, took two big hits there. This first shot was bounced. The second shot got my gunner and knocked out my horizontal drive. They both were clearly going for the turret. What I think happened was one shell hit and did no damage. The second shell hit probably closer to the middle of the turret, and that was a nice explosion, and penetrated and did some serious damage to my crew. So I have to sit back and repair for about 30 seconds. But so far this tank has done alright in terms of taking hits. The Tiger II though is doing a very good job, and the key difference, I think, the reason the Tiger II doesn't have 200mm of armor, right? But the Tiger II is better armored. And what do I mean by that? I mean it has angles and weird shapes and things like that. This armor on the Tiger P isn't angled, which is a serious flaw. You'll notice that there's not, I think just about every Russian tank has angles and things like that. Their armor's not as thick, but they have all kinds of weird things they can throw at you. Now my rate of fire has been cut in half, which is a little annoying, because that's really the advantage we have over them, is that our rate of fire is much, much faster. I was very worried that this Su-122 is just going to come around the corner and derp us, but he fortunately is unable to. Teammate plants a shell into him. I put a shell right through the front. You see the nice spread in there. Get the last crew member in the engine. Knock him out. And now it's time to go forward because there's lots of dead tanks here and we need to keep the push going. There's a tank destroyer that's on the map behind us, and he's a little bit of an issue, but he's hopefully being dealt with by our teammates, and we have to keep moving forward. We can't sit and turn and deal with him because there's tanks to our front. Granted, they are a little occupied. Not anymore. Right through the ammo rack and detonated it. So this tank's taken a little bit of a beating. It took an IS-2, two IS-2 shells. It took some T-34-85 shells, and it's still kicking pretty well. it can be really durable, but my main issue with it is that the armor is flat, and the armor is what this tank wants to use to continue the game. Whereas the Tiger IIs, they have weird angled armor, and that becomes an issue for Russian guns. So I would say you have to be very mindful that the armor is not all it's cracked up to be, even though it is thick. And that's my, I guess, main nugget of information for this tank. It has 200 millimeters of armor, but don't whip out the wallet for that reason, because in my opinion, I don't think the armor is any more effective than well, no, it can be really effective, but it's going to be very soon. People are going to learn very quickly how to deal with it, right? And people are going to learn very quickly, that the shoulders of the tank are very weak, so even at long ranges you can just plant a shell through that. Is a small target, but if they can find your range, you're pretty much toast, and that's a lot of the battle. It also upgrades the battle rating of the Tiger, but doesn't upgrade the gun. Now, I don't think the Tiger gets APCR, which, obviously this tank does. But it's just not, I could be wrong. I honestly haven't played the Tiger that much. Haven't played it since 1.4. Well, I have, but not like very recently. So I don't remember exactly what ammunition choices it gets. But the point is that this tank is not, it's not like a T95 or another tank sort of like that, where it can just sit in front of the enemy, soak up all the damage in the world. It just doesn't happen. This tank relies on its enemies not necessarily knowing what to do with just raw thickness of armor. And here we have an SU-100, very dangerous tank, and APCR round bounces off his driver's hatch, a little unfortunate. And right here I'm doing what I talked about. I'm trying to just light him up with the machine gun and cause problems for him. But I take a hit in the side from a T-44 that set me on fire, and I had to turn. There was nothing about it. I just had to, because if I didn't, we were going to get knocked out by this SU-100. So unfortunate. But the armor is taking a hit. It's taking 2 hits from that SU-100. And there you go. It took another hit off the turret face, and a T-44 knocks me out. You can see the penetration holes on the side of the turret there, or the back of the turret. That's going to do you in 90% of the time, but let's move on to the opinion, shall we? Alright, so opinion time. What do I think of the Tiger P? I think it's a solid tank. I think it has issues, but it also has strengths. Alright, you have to protect these shoulders and to some degree the turret face, primarily on this right side, but you do have 200 millimeters frontal armor even if it is flat. So at medium ranges you can be fairly safe. IS-2s can deal with you, but if you back it up a little farther, it's more difficult to deal with them, and so it's a solid tank. The big question everyone is asking, is it worth it? Alright, and I'm going to answer that in a couple ways. The other tier 4 option is the Command Jagdpanther. Alright, and the first thing you'll notice, it gets the same reward, right? 100% plus 100% plus 256. Same thing on the Tiger 1, or the Tiger P. Alright, so they get the same reward. The main differences you have is that the Jagdpanther is much, much faster. It has the 88mm Pak 43, so it has a better gun. It is 0.7 battle rating higher though. Alright, what does that mean? It means it can see up. It won't see rank 5s, well, like T-54 rank 5s. It'll see IS-3s, IS-2s, T-32s, Pattons, things like that. But it won't see like M103, which, debatable if that's a problem, and it won't see T-54s really, unless you get some serious bad matchmaking. Now, the key thing about what makes the Jagdpanther tick is that the armor, although it's not incredibly thick, it's only 80 millimeters, it is sloped really hard. And at range, that more often than not means something. Alright? Yeah, it's effectively 130 to like 120 to 150. But the key thing is that it's sloped really hard, so it just tends to bounce more things. Alright, and there's no really obvious frontal weak spots. So, I don't know. I feel like the Jagdpanther is the better buy. Given just my opinion, I think the Jagdpanther is overall a better tank. It's a tank destroyer though, so it's got its own problems. It doesn't have a turret, and it's very prone to, if it gets hit in the side, it's also knocked out. But it's faster and it has a better gun, which I feel like you can make work easier than armor with a gun with suspicious AP shells, decent APCR shells, well, fairly good APCR shells, but the penetration might be lacking at range against things like T-32s and the upper level of tanks this thing can see. IS-2s less so, but they're tricky, right? But it has very obvious weak points that I feel like people are going to be figuring out fairly soon. But here's the thing. The thing is that my opinion should be taken with a grain of salt. I've played this tank, and these are my thoughts. I think it's solid. I don't think it's great. Do I think it's worth it? It's a tough sell for me. I think if you're into, well, there's a couple ways you can look at it. If you're into is this thing going to grind me rank 5? Is this a good grinding tank? I think the Jagdpanther is a better grinding tank. Like just playing endlessly, and the only reason you have it is to grind out those experience points faster to get to rank 5 or whatever you're trying to do. Get the tanks you want, whatever. I don't think that the Tiger P, being at a 6.0 battle rating, really... I don't think the competition it sees is similar to the same as the Jagdpanther, because you think about 6.7, it'll see up to 7.7. That's basically the same tanks. There's actually pretty much a gap between 7.0 and 8.0, right? So you're really not going to see... Neither tank will see T-54s, but they will both see IS-2s, IS-3s, right? T-32s, M26s, M4, the earliest the M46. You'll still see all those tanks. So the battle rating difference isn't a huge deal. The advantage you have with the Tiger P is that you might see lower level competition. However, you're at a point where most people are playing Tiger 2s or Tigers, right? And you're more likely to get hooked up with teammates that are driving Tiger 2s than you are teammates driving Tigers. Now, it's happened. I've been in teams where it's mostly Tigers and I'm sort of the top shelf battle rating. But a lot of the times you end up with Tiger 2s, which are like 6.7 battle rating. So what's that mean? It means your competition is kind of 6.7 area. You don't see many like IS-1s and things like that. You generally see SU-100s, IS-2s, T-44s, T-34-85s. You don't really see any of the early IS like the IS-1. You see IS-2s mainly, and SU-100s really, and T-44s. So is the competition any different between these tanks? I don't think so, really. And this gun deals with that competition more efficiently. Has a better AP shell, has a better APCR shell, same heat shell. Alright, and at long ranges, the gun is generally better. The rate of fire is extremely similar, and it's way faster, so it can get to places quicker and get to its position faster and set up and start shooting. The thing with the Tiger P is that it has a turret, and it's more efficient than the Jagdpanther at more of the frontline brawling, simply because it does have this thick armor. Granted, it has weak points, but like I said, if you can use it properly and put it on this, let's say the side of a building, put the wall of the building right here and turn the turret, Or better yet, from this side, because the turret is actually longer on this side, put it right here, put the wall right here, and this is actually very, very durable armor. A majority of the part of the turret you'll be showing is 200 millimeters. So you're presenting 200 to 250 millimeters of armor. I like that. So in terms of like the city maps and the brawling and being close, if you can put something right here, which is very doable, like a wall, like I said, a wall of a building, this tank will do very, very well. The Jagdpanther won't do as well simply because it doesn't have a turret. Alright, and at close ranges, you can deal with it more effectively than you can at long ranges. So it's really a judgment decision you need to make for yourself, is the whole point of that. I think they're similar. I like the Jagdpanther better, but that's my personal preference as a player. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is if I could only buy one of these, and I was really I was decided I'm going to get a rank 4 German premium, I would buy the Jagdpanther. That being said, if you really don't like the look of the Jagdpanther, if you really think, man, I don't want to sit in the back sniping, I'd rather be, up with, handing out the meat and potatoes and delivering the good news into the whites of my enemy's eyes, Tiger P is probably the better option. Alright? But that's really a judgment decision you need to make about how you want to play your premium. This tank is solid. It's not the best, but I don't think it's the worst either. You could definitely do a lot worse than this tank. And in the short term, and especially players who maybe haven't seen this thing before, they don't think about the shoulders of the tank. They don't think about this. They don't think about the machine gun port as being a weak point. So generally they just bounce shells off the front or try and shoot at the turret, in which case about half the turret is tough armor. So, yeah, long-winded opinion. Personally, I don't know if I'd buy this tank. Do I regret buying it? No, I don't, because I think it has its place. I thought I had fun driving it, but I have fun driving most tanks, even if they are kind of bad. So, and this tank isn't bad, it's just not great, So, would I buy it? The answer is yes, but the reason is different. I like buying these tanks because I kind of like the idea of like collecting them, I guess. It's like, oh, this is a really cool, unique tank, wow, it'd be great if I could get this. That's more like why I would do it, because I already had the Jagdpanther, and I think the Jagdpanther is a much more effective grinding tool than this tank. But that being said, if you really like the look of this tank, by all means, do what you want. But I think the Jagdpanther is a better buy. And yeah, so there you go. That's my thoughts about this tank. It's solid. It's not great, but you could do a lot worse. And you will have those times where you just bounce every shell that comes at you. And then there will also be times where you get one shotted, no big deal, because someone just plants one right through these shoulders. So, and take it as you will. But that's my thoughts. It's solid. So, God, that was a long final opinion. Usually these are pretty short. The last final opinion bit, it's usually pretty short. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something. Maybe I answered some of your questions. If you felt like I talked in logical circles and didn't answer any of your questions, feel free to ask your questions in the comments section. I'll be more than happy to answer them in long-winded and hopefully more precise terminology, as I can really kind of bring my thoughts together. So I'll be more than happy to answer questions down below. Be more than happy to reply to comments, whatever you want to do. Comment section's a great place to do it. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a rating, a little like or something like that, and subscribe if you are new to the channel and you really enjoyed this review. Or if you thought I was dumb and long-winded and boring, well, I hope this helped you fall asleep. So, anyway, I've been Corny Swiss. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And I'll see you next time.